about yeah, it's more about today is more about just maybe people's questions than because there's ample amount of information out there, like everything. So I just a few slides, six actually, so it'll be quick enough to with the woodland one yesterday, which had a few more slides. So I suppose what's a hedgerow? We all sort of I think nearly everybody knows who lives in the country what a hedgerow is. Just a couple of clips there. Unfortunately, we also know I didn't put in a picture of what some people think a hedgerow should look like when they go with big flail mowers, flail hedge cutters, and massacre hedgerows. We're all familiar with that. But lucky enough, there's greater awareness now as to how important they are. So why plant them? Again, people know, but just to go over this, food, shelter, nesting for wildlife, birds. I should have probably put birds in there as opposed to wildlife, although you could have dare I say, hedgehogs nesting, rolled up in a ball in a nice dry hedge. But it's associated plants, like that first picture there. It's not just the trees; it's all the plants that come in there. Particularly early in the season, where would you see primroses? They'll be generally they're refuges for a lot of plants because the rest of the land's so intensely managed. So it's probably the last place that a lot of plants have, and it's from there that a place are let go wild that these plants will move out. I always think of primroses as being one of those. You might see bluebells, they've been sprayed, cut, everything out in the normal land. Obviously, why were hedgerows? Why did they ever come about in the first place? Um, they're a man-made creation. I think that's fair to say for most of them. Again, for fencing, and it can last for decades. As we all know, you spend a lot of money on modern-day fencing, and it lasts only maybe 10, 15, 20 years, you're really lucky, and it's fallen down. Whereas a good, properly made hedge will last for decades, literally hundreds of years. And one of the ways to traditional methods was hedge laying, which has been revived now by a lot of people. So that's an option. And then I have up at the top there, I should have said why plant native Irish grown. I think that's very important because there's an enormous amount of plants coming in from abroad that are being sold as native trees, hedging. And people think I'm putting them in. But they're actually grown, their seed is collected abroad and it's grown abroad. And it's a different sort of plant. Um, we were talking there recently about one of the Burren talks. And it was brought up about like one of the plants trees we have, so we're supplying is Persian buckthorn, and it grows totally different in the burn than it does grow inland. So likewise, you can imagine a tree that's growing in, let's say, Belgium or France, hedge tree, is going to be different. The obvious one is different flowering times, and it's not in sync then with the normal plants, insect life and so on, that might be coming out pollinators and so on. But I think the biggest fear in the last couple of years is the importation, and it's happened. And it's widespread now. It's fire blight. Fire blight was always sort of around Ireland, hovering, popping up here and there, but a lot of it came in there a couple of years ago on hawthorn, which was imported because there wasn't enough to supply the market here in Ireland, and people went abroad and got it. But plants are always coming in. We all know about other diseases such as that. So, native Irish grown trees for disease and to be in sync with the general flora and fauna of the Irish landscape is very important. Obviously, part of our heritage, for literally, we say, hundreds of years, it effectively has replaced our lost woodlands and acts as a corridor then between these pockets of woodlands that are still left, whether it be up by streams or whatever, to link those. So it's, yeah, particularly, I think even, and that's showing up even more now. We have an idea maybe what a hedge look is, nicely trimmed and cut back, but in my opinion, a hedge should be sort of a bit messy, the smaller trees and then bigger ones above it. But we have seen now there's a lot of work being done in trying to find resistant trees are resistant to the ash disease. And it's those hedgerows now that are proven extremely important as people can see around the country that there's ash trees that all around them they're dead, but there's these individuals. And thankfully, Chagas there and the Forest Service and so on are putting a lot of money into that at the moment and research. And people, citizen science coming into play. People are taking pictures of those trees, sending them, they're going out and collecting samples, see will they be potentially the ash trees that we were resistant to ash dieback. And then, traditionally why another thing was the source of natural resources, fuel. stock fencing, shelter for livestock, screening, construction materials. And now with the more modern twist of that, is talk about carbon storage. Huge reservoir of storage. Again, the hedgerows account for something, I don't know, I don't want to be quoting this, but something like 5% of the, you could effectively say the tree cover in Ireland is in hedgerows. So they're extremely important from that point of view. No, and then down to what trees have been planted. I specifically targeted ones. I was given a list by I think it was Lee. I don't know who, but somebody. I think it was yourself, Lee, that gave me that. So these are just. I couldn't squeeze these pictures. They're all small. I was trying to just to show what the tree looks like. But unfortunately, I'd have several sites to try and put these. But the list follows down from the grey. So on the left there, you got grey willow. And as a tree, it's a very messy sort of tree, and you might say, why would you want that or willow? But it's extremely important because it's one first to flower, and for bees in the early. So they'll be flowering in the month of April, maybe, depending on the weather. And you'll often notice them, people mightn't realise what all this fluff, if you're in a certain area, all blown around. And the road can literally, in some mornings, where I lived, there's a lot of them. The road, it looks like there was snow on the road when all the flowers fall off and so on. Very important. The next one sort of to come in then is the cherry, early summer. The flowers, and then you got the fruit. Then, of course, again, the flowers are early summer, and the fruit follows quickly afterwards. And they're literally you don't really see them because literally as soon as they're turning red, the blackbirds and so on are eating them. Spindle, June again, fruit, and then in mid autumn, you've got the actual fruit itself. Gilda Rose, similar again, and hazel. Hazel, the nuts, it's sort of August. Strange, you might think it's a bit later in the year, but they become they're readily available. Hawthorn again, later flowers again in spring, but the fruit again can run into you'll see the odd ones still around with it. Holly, same thing again. It's a fruits layer, and then the fruit will be there right into December. And if I've seen some can last even longer, depends. It seems to be some holly trees that seem to have a unique ability to produce seed that birds won't eat. I've seen trees that have not been touched till they literally fall off. And crab apple. And then I just put on the lucky bag because there might be some. We've got a limited supply of honeysuckle, elderflower, and maybe eared willow that might end up in the mix. We're trying to grow honeysuckle. Honeysuckle is very important for bees again and the smell. It'd be a new one and it'd be hard to get. Again, these are all grown here in Ireland in one form or another, not being imported, to be sold on. It sort of defeat the purpose. So I'm going to the next slide. Now, this is off the Burren Bio, the Hare's Corner website. I had decided what's the point in duplicating it, just to give a rundown on what to do. Again, you can see there in the top left, you've got the trees that are mentioned, how to plant. I think one very important thing is to keep them wet, and it is a good idea, as is mentioned here, to drop the trees in for an hour or so into a bucket of water. Um, that's extremely important, and more so in recent years, where we've always had dry springs, and they can cause an issue. That dry spell can cause an issue with recently planted trees. Um, so you could potentially be looking at if you got a really dry weather that you would have to water. And when we say water, don't mean going out and sprinkle. You literally have to be going out like with a barrel and throwing buckets of water into trees. That's better than going out with a little watering can and dribbling a drop of water. You have to douse some water. You have to do that once a week to survive. But going out with a little bit of water isn't going to be good enough. So large volumes of water. Just be careful you don't obviously wash them out of it. And that I sort of jumped ahead there a bit because you had to plant them first. So the spacing there, again, spacing, we have 40, you might see 30 centimeters, but that's really up to the person and the space to have and what they've got in terms of plants because you're only getting so many. So mine go to 50 centimeters, might be a bit far apart, but I maybe 30, 40 or so, or 45. But again, as I said, it depends also on the trees you're planting because there's been in that mix, there's supply that we mentioned cherry, which will be let grow on. So the idea is that you put down one row and then you move back a bit, as you can see there, 50 centimeters or so, and then stick the other one, they're staggered. Again, as it says here, you can go wider if you want a bigger hedge. But the number that a lot of people are getting are only small hedges. If somebody's going to be doing like a half a kilometer, it's a different thing to what a lot of people are going to be filling in gaps. But the main thing is the planting of them then. The hole deep enough. You just stick a slate. Preparation, I think, will be again. It'll depend on your circumstances. I get the impression some people might be filling in gaps. If you're doing a new sort of stretch, it's a good idea probably to dig it up, maybe plow it, and thinking about what people might have. Generally, nowadays, many diggers are readily available, so that would be the ideal thing. You would dig it up to about a foot or so, and just turn it back in. It's nice and loose. Then it's perfect for planting. And you put your trees in then, well heeled in, stamp them in, so that they won't be rocking, and the soil will be in contact with the roots. Once that's done, then there's a the next thing is to cut the back because you want them to grow bushy. Like it will seem like a bit of a contradiction. Again, would I do this? Maybe you're filling a gap up. I might not do it. I'm always conscious of weed growth and so on, and which I'll cover now in a minute. Other problems. But if you're going in a nice new stretch, yeah, it's advisable to cut them back to around, if you would see there, 10 to 15 centimeter at an angle. And that will then allow you to put a sheet of plastic on top of them to punch through because they act like a spike that you can just punch you don't have to create a hole in the plastic. That's one method. Other is you lay down the plastic or membrane or whatever. As I say, you can now get biodegradable black plastic. It lasts, depending on the circumstance, about no more than 2 years, maybe 18 months at a max. It's the material that's used for growing maize, and you could put that down first and then just slit the spade into that plastic and put your tree in that way. It might be easier, kind of getting quite messy trying to punch, the plastic if you cut the tree and then try to put the plastic over it. Um, so yeah, I'm going to come on to this now. Just it'd probably be one of the actually last slides here. This is the a big part and a big issue for a lot of people is this handy. It's easy enough planting. You can't go too wrong, but this is where a lot of things go wrong. Is the maintenance of them after that. So you got the big risks are hares, rabbits, deer, and bank falls. Um, and hares probably first. Rabbits, you will know. Generally speaking, will know if people have rabbits in the area. Hares come and go. They're transient. Could come in at this time of year. They will. Yeah, how you know hair damage is they will nick the top off, and it will be cut like if somebody literally went along with a secretary's code. There'll be a little twig at the base. The rabbits will literally ring bark the trunk, so the stem, I should say. They'll nibble away all up along. And deer, a lot of people think they don't have deer. It's a big problem now. Maybe on the East Coast less so, but all down the western sort of people who think they don't have deer do have deer, and deer will pull them up maybe in the early stages, but will constantly browse them that they'll never get established. Bank falls are like they're like a mouse to the if you're to untrained eye, and they again they're a west of Ireland type problem all up along. They came in from Shannon originally up the estuary. They came and they basically live in banks, as their name implies. That's their ideal sort of thing. Heavy grassy areas, not necessarily exactly banks, but sort of that sort of the habitat that would be associated with. And they will nibble ringbark the stem again. As I say, just to be aware of them, the day wouldn't be that big a problem. Then you got your vegetation, and the reason you put on the mulch, the plastic, to keep that down. And you got bindweeds and everything it all come in, and it just comes in with a bang in the month of May. One day you're looking out, you can see your trees. The next day you can't; they're all covered in weeds. Mulching, uh, as you say, plastic is sort of traditional or some sort of geotextile membrane has been used. You got old cardboard. Wood chip will be more readily available now because of there's a lot of wood chippers around now because of change in burning of vegetation. So it might be easier to get that. As I said, the biodegradable plastic. That's to the best of my knowledge really the only real source of that is to the supplier of plastic that for growing the maize is black plastic. It's like cling film sort of. And then you'd want to avoid grass clippings. People might think that looks like a great job, but it'll create a sort of anaerobic, stinky mess, and it also has an issue with nitrogen. As I said earlier on, drought conditions, everything can be going hunky dory, and then you get dry weather. and it can be severe drought there, as we've all seen in the month of March, April. Yeah, just when these trees are getting to go. I just included and there in the bottom pictures there, and the two pictures. One is they're smaller tree guards, and you will be obviously putting in for deer. And them ones are biodegradable. To say the last 2 to 3 years, if that's where you want to go. They're spiral then at the bottom, spiral tree guards. If the trees are strong enough, you may not need the canes. Again, this is like where you know you have a problem. Um, and they're reusable. They can be pulled off after 2 or 3 years, and you can use them elsewhere. So even though they're plastic, can still be used again. So that's the end of my sort of chat. Quick, so I'm assuming hopefully there'll be a few questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Bernard. And yeah, I know like we don't know if they're going to be planting new or not, but with the 50 trees they're getting, if it is a new hedge, would you also recommend the alternating, like a double row of planting?
Yeah. Well, if it's a new head, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But if somebody's filling the gap, they just have to go what to have.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll be sending around a resource sheet around the hedgerow. So we'll have the standard trees, your cherry and crabapple, and then the hedging trees, and which ones are more shade tolerant, like holly, for
Yeah.
example.
That if somebody is going into an existing hedgerow, they want to be conscious of that. You know, holly is the most shade tolerant. The other issue is if you're going to fill in a gap, is going to be maybe drought. The drought's going to hit those quicker because those areas are going to dry out because they've got all those trees drawn out of water. So it's just they need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Mm,
So we did have a question. The first question came in. Our area is weedy. Do we need to clear the weeds before planting the trees? So I think you've covered that yes,
Yeah,
um,
yeah. Yeah,
best to
what do we do?
cover
Still need to water. Well, you don't need to. You don't need to water at the moment, anyway. That's for sure. Um, yeah, but you might. But if you get the trees, maybe what the person meant was, if you get the bag of trees, maybe yes, as I said, to soak them for an hour or two overnight. Just throw them into buckets of water. Just then they've taken in the. It wouldn't be too bad this time because everything's so wet, but it could be an issue in slightly drier weather because I gather you're going to be cutting out trees right into nearly late February, isn't it? So you could head into a dry spell.
Yeah, there's a couple counties that are getting trees in early March, but they won't be in this webinar because it is the new 2026 count.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
So just if they're dry, yeah, is if they look dry, just to throw them into water overnight. I would say they're not. That's not going to do them any harm.
and is horse manure okay for fertilizer?
Yeah, once the key part of any farmyard type of manure material is that it's composted, like it's a year old sort of thing, not just fresh, out of the shed. Of course, a lot of horse manure, some of it has sawdust with, so that mightn't be too bad, but preferably composted, yeah, 6, 12 months at least.
Will the trees be bare root or in pots? They'll be bare root.
There'll be. I grow. I'm not the only one supplying,
Holly.
and I'll have anything I grow is in pots. So, for instance, the holly will be in pots.
Yeah.
They'll be in a little pot. I think that's not exactly what that person's asking, but the most important thing is get these in as soon as possible because the best will in the world, people will say, I'll do that next week, and then I'll do it next week, and next week, and next thing it's dry weather, and then they go out. Particularly as we get, it doesn't seem relevant now, was you get once those further on, and you're in the bag and in the shed, they could be prompted to grow a bit, sprout a bit quicker. And hawthorn in particular, if people get them, and if they put out leaves at all, you try to plant them, they just die. Some trees are little bit more tolerant of abuse. So the main thing I think is people need to be getting into their head. These have to go in as soon as possible, rather than I can do them, two
Yeah,
months
as well
later.
though, I think for transport, people are thinking, do I need a big trailer and all this? The bare root trees, you could fit them in one bag in
Yeah.
one
And
seat. And
any standard car boot, yeah, they're not going to be big. They're not big
tiny
fives.
Fiat or something.
Yeah.
But your potted holly, let's say, those are just in like a 1 liter pot.
Yeah,
So
they're in a small little pot again. They're not even big. They're not getting many of them. You like, for instance, you put easily 50, 75 of them into a bag. So They're
Yeah.
not big plants. They're tall. They'll be over a foot tall, but they're in a small. Even though they're not bare root, it's still not a big pot.
In the 50 trees we are receiving, can I confirm they are a mix of all the hedging trees mentioned in the presentation? Yes. Yes. And for some of them, you might get just one of each. I think like the cherry and Gilder Rose, you're just getting one. I can, if you just bear with me a second, I can tell you the quantities, but again, they're going to um, these could be movable. So for the hedge, so you'd get around 24 hawthorn, 10 hazel. You know what? I'll just pop this in the chat so you can all see it. Um, put that right in there. Did that come through? Yeah, 24 hawthorn, 10 hazel, 4 Gilder rose, 4 gray willow, 3 spindle, 3 holly, 1 crabapple, 1 cherry for a total of 50. But again, that's give or take. And like Bernard mentioned, there could be a lucky grab bag of some
Hmm.
others. And if you don't want any, don't, feel free not to take them. But that is the quantity. And yeah, so that was her question. For our city space, what type of maintenance is required for the hedge?
Well, that's the same as any hedge. It's weeding and watering. You know, uh, as I said, if you're fortunate enough and you can do it, good mulching, you're going to save yourself a lot of work, but you still probably need a little bit of mulching or so on.
Yeah, I think
So,
maintenance, when people say maintenance, they're thinking of the hedges that are 10, 15 plus years old where it's
oh right, well,
thing.
okay,
So
okay,
it
well
that's not needed here.
no, yeah, yeah, yeah. I never thought. And we're not. Yeah, I'm only thinking of getting them going, and then worry
Yeah.
about
No.
that. That's a whole other webinar again.
Yeah.
We will come back in 10 years' time and have
Yeah, exactly.
discuss
Hedge
about that.
laying and all that. Um, so yeah, just keeping the weeds down, I
Hmm.
suppose, and keeping them watered. We have an old existing hedge which is 50 plus years. We have new native hedging. We planted 2 years ago from bare roots. We planted them straight in the grass and they're growing great. How do we decide where best to put the 50 trees? For example, by direction or by where are the most gaps? So just an existing hedge. Well, ideally you'd start a new hedge, but but yeah, if you're just filling it in um by direction. I suppose Bernard, would you want him in the full sun since it's new? Would you suggest whatever's south facing if that's able, or I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose. Yeah, the question there. Maybe that's what they're trying to gear towards. Yeah, so they're getting more light. As I said, there are two things to be conscious of in a hedge that somebody's filling up is light and water. Because they're going to be competing for those. So, if you're trying to, you might cut back some of the others, at the edges or whatever, just trim them back so they get light. South facing will be so the sun can get at them, yeah. But I think, you just have to do it and hope for the best sort of thing.
Yeah, and if in the hedge, we'll have an example, but since you're getting 24 hawthorn, it'll be maybe let's say two hawthorn per foot if you're creating a new hedge, and then there'll be the trees sporadically placed throughout. So if you're looking at your own hedge, and there's not very many trees full length that you're letting him go, you could pop in the cherry or the Gilder rose or spindle. I suppose it depends on what your hedge currently looks like
Yeah.
and what you'd want to have it fill out with. I have a few more questions. What are your recommendations on spacing between the trees?
Yeah, now I presume when they say the trees, they mean the trees that want to grow on. Like you have cherry. The ones you're thinking of growing on there are cherry, apple, holly can grow on to any of these can grow on to a tree. You wouldn't really willow and they're all trees to just we call them hedges because we've got the back. But the ones on that list stand out as trees that you'd never think of a cherry sort of as a bush as such. You want that to grow on. And crabapple will be similar. Holly can be clipped or can be let grow onto a tree too. Spindle is more bushy, willow is more bushy, gilroy is more bushy, hazel again. So to answer that question, person sort of it's up to you. It depends on spacing, but at least 5 meters apart. And you can go further apart, depending on your situation, so that they can grow on to be trees. Um, And then it could be, as I say, you see, if you were thinking in a farmland situation, you were planting a lot, you'd be thinking, well, I'm going to have a machine doing this, and I don't want them hopping in and out, so you might go 10 meters apart, and it just fit whatever. I say at a minimum 5 meters apart, and then it's up to the person, their circumstances, what to want. But you just want those trees marked. Then, if in time somebody's going to come out with a hedge cutter, that they know to keep those trees, because in the winter. You won't know. A lad that's coming in on an hourly rate just wants to get the job done. So those would need to be flagged, those
That's a
trees.
lot. I wouldn't have assumed 5 meters. That seems like a good distance apart from.
Yeah, well, to grow them into, I'm talking about they're growing to proper trees.
Yeah.
There's no. I would also say, I mean, somebody might say, "Oh no, that's." I do say there's no rule. Like it's whatever you like. Just the most important thing is the trees grow, and then it's up to personal preferences. But I'm thinking of at the moment as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking, oh, a nice tree that forms, and if there's another one 5 meters apart, it can all grow into proper trees.
Okay.
You
Gotcha. Um, Okay, do we have to ensure that the person planting has some sort of qualification, or is it okay that family are planting? Do you have to hire specialists? No, everyone, Hare's Corner participants, everyone plants their own trees. I mean, some people hire someone to do it, but for the most part, we're expecting you all to plant the trees. And it's very simple, like Bernard was saying, a slit, and you just wiggle it back and forth and stick in. They're bare roots, so
It's very
it's
simple.
it's very
The
simple.
most important thing is they, I did. There was a pitch. It was alluded to in that last clip, the infographic, but is not to plant them too deep. That's one of the biggest after drought and those rabbit is it's up there. It's too deep will kill them. The and there's a little collar. You can sort of see it. Obviously, the potted plants are obvious because that's to the level at the top of the pot. That's the plant, and the others sort of have it's just where the roots end, and you can't go too wrong. Even a little bit of roots at the top of the roots. Were to start going down, if they're sticking above, it's not too bad. But if you go like halfway up the stem, like it's going to rot and die. So not too deep
Yeah,
and
and a
firm.
lot of these, with trees, they've been doing this longer than we've all been alive. So
Yeah.
you just trust them to get what they need, the sun and the nutrients, and they'll grow most likely. I know someone made a comment, the west wind is awful on our old trees. Um, so yeah, if there's any sort of shelter belt, like obviously if they're very, very exposed, it's going to be tough going for them. But you know, for
I
most
guess if it's a new hedge, particularly up here, I mean, we're really talking about extremes now. Up in West Clare here, where I'm based, people will put up netting to protect their hedge. Generally, they're doing that for garden type plants. I don't think you think about the hedging that people are putting up. They're with exception of holly, which is actually quite resistant to a lot of exposures, but the others all lose their leaves in winter. So all that wind and there, if you're on the westerly sort of side, I'm talking about here in the coastal areas, um, the salt spray and so on. They lose, so they get fresh leaves again in the spring, so they get going again. So it doesn't bother them as much as something like an evergreen hedge that somebody might be planting around their garden.
All right. Do you have to use plastic on each hedge tree if there are no known munchers about? Just planted over 100 meters of native hedgerow in County Sligo with community group. I'm not the recipient of this project, but am for the mini orchard. However, hopped onto this webinar out of interest. Um, sure, you're taking a chance, maybe, but if there are no known munchers, I suppose to watch and see.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some people will know where they are. Like rabbits are generally you will know if you have a rat problem, because you can see them. Hares will come in. Deer, I know I can't say because it's a cost to people to go and buy this stuff, and it's more plastic and so on, and you don't want to be encouraging that. But I just highlight the people. You will know from talking to people in the area. I'm planting a site now at the moment, and the owner said we don't want a deer in the area. But says no, there's deer in the area. I know there is, and lo and behold, I'm out in the field and I can see deer droppings, but they've never seen deer. So deer will find them. But in a hedgerow situation, you would see if it's happening, then you just have to react. So maybe just wait. And then unlike let's say planting a woodland thing, if they're chopped back, it's not a big deal because they're going to grow back again, and they'll be bushier. So it could be an indirect way of cutting your trees back. But it's just if it's continuous, you might not have anything, particularly something like your individual trees that you want to grow on, and there's deer around. You never really have a proper tree. As I said, it's more, you could almost draw a line down the country, it's a bigger west of Ireland sort of, problem. Cork, Kerry, Limerick, all up along Galway, Sligo, than it might be in, let's say, Meath may have them, but everywhere's got pockets of them, I would say, at this stage, every county. Dare say, even somebody recently told me they nearly crashed into one on the M50 running across. So, in fact, the only reason it's a bit of a joke, sort of funny thing is there's one running around, there's a stag running around Ennis in County Clare. He's in the town going from one place to another. So that's all I'm just saying. I'm not trying to panic people, just because people might just think of plant them and that's it and they're grand. And I just outline what to watch out for so that they are aware that this can be an issue. So if you didn't know, you wouldn't be looking out for it.
Yeah, and if anyone else has any question, I know Bernard shared his email at the end, and we're recording this, and I'll send out the link to everyone so that you have it. I just popped my email in the chat, lee@burnbo.com. So if you think of any questions that pop into your head after this, feel free to send them on to either Bernard or myself. Um, and yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you at the
Yeah,
handout days.
yeah, and of course, at the handout days, we'll also be able to. I don't know. I'll be at. Don't generally. I do drop off, but I'm usually gone. But yourselves will be able to answer those questions too. If people can come up with more when they've seen, thought
Yeah,
about it.
we'll have printouts there, infographics. We'll have all the species breakdown and have them labeled. So, or you'll be labeling them. But yeah, we'll help at the handout and share as much information as possible. Um, but yeah, well, thanks so much, Bernard,
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
and thank you everyone for attending.
Okay, bye.
All right, bye now.